Well, good afternoon, everyone. Happy Thanksgiving week. It's Tuesday, November 23rd from the Tiger Club of Kansas City Zoom call. Our guest today from the sporting news, longtime columnist Mike DeCourcy. Before we get to Mike, a little update on some things pertaining to Mizzou sports. Yesterday, Tyler Beatty was named one of the 3 finalists for the Doak Walker Award, annually given to the top running back in the country, and I think that is well deserved. The second week in a row, Mizzou had the SEC Defensive Lineman of the Week. Who would have thought that early in the season? This week it was Trajan Jeffcoat for his performance against Florida. And Harrison Mevis, our kicker, was named the SEC Co-Special Teams Player of the Week. Women's basketball is off to a 4-0 start. Izzy Higginbottom named SEC Freshman of the Week this week, and the Tigers take on Troy tonight. Hey, I want to let you know that the Tiger Club has tickets and parking available for all men's and women's basketball games this season. If you'd like to take advantage of that, please send an email to president@kctigerclub.com. And as always, check our website at kctigerclub.com for updated information on events and other news. And again, we are looking into the possibility of meeting in person after the first of the year, and we'll keep you posted on that. Let's get to our guest, Mike DeCourcy. For 20 years, a columnist with the Sporting News. He is an expert on college basketball, on soccer, and the Pittsburgh Steelers. Mike, how you doing?
I am doing very well, Mark. How are you?
We're great. We look forward to talking to you. Happy Thanksgiving to you. Let's talk about Missouri basketball. It's been a bit of a rough start for the Tigers. Of course, a really tough loss to UMKC. Bounced back with a come-from-behind win against SMU, and then last night just were never in the game against Florida State. What is the state of the Mizzou program right now, in your opinion?
I think that to an extent, as I was looking at this and thinking about it coming into today, I think that this year would feel like a natural retrenchment, a natural point to build over, because you lost 4 players who were basically core players for the Tigers for 2 to 3 years. And they together last year averaged 50 points a game. So it's not unexpected that you would have something of a rebuilding period. I think it would maybe feel a little better for Tigers fans if last year had ended better. 3-7 down the stretch, losing that first round game tough to Oklahoma. I don't know that this year would feel maybe quite as painful if last year had gone the way it seemed like it might have gone at one point when they were 13-3. And I do the NCAA tournament bracket projections on Fox, and at one point they were an easy top 3, top 4 seed. And by the time we got to Selection Sunday, it was pretty easy to put them in an 8-9 game. It was pretty obvious that was the direction they were headed, that they had had a good season, belonged in the field, beat too many good teams to be buried in the first 4, or to be buried in a 12 seed, but a perfect team to put in an 8-9 game, because they didn't seem at that point to pose much threat to the number 1 if they were able to beat the whoever the 8 was or whoever the 9 was. So I think that last year, maybe the disappointment of last year impacts the way a Tigers fan might view the early struggles this year. Of course, that's, I don't know that any fan of any team is ever going to look at a game like UMKC and be comfortable with it. Any major team, especially one with the Tigers' proud history, is going to look at what happened against UMKC and feel okay with it, because it wasn't even just, oh, the other team came in, played great, and they beat us close. The UMKC owned that game almost the whole way. And that's not something that one would ordinarily expect of an opponent playing what we call in the business a bye game, where the Tigers don't have to return that game to the Kangaroos' home court. So that part of it is difficult to explain. I think to an extent, Missouri is emblematic of a lot of what's happening in college basketball this year. I think that this year there's more mystery in college basketball than at any point. I've been doing this since 1986. So that's 35 years now. covering college basketball on a daily basis. And the mystery is created by the immediate eligibility of transfers. We've always had that little dose of mystery when freshmen come in. How good are they going to be? How ready are they going to be? How soon can they play and make an impact? But you also have sophomores, juniors, seniors in place that you know more or less what to expect from them. This year, for the first time, really, you have almost an entire landscape full of teams that don't really have 100% idea of what they are. Your rivals to the west there played in the Champions Classic and played Michigan State and won. They pulled away down the stretch, won fairly comfortably. And after the game, their coach Bill Self said, "We have no idea what we're doing, and we're hard to scout because we have no idea what we're doing." And that's kind of a lot of college basketball right now, because Kansas is a team that has a lot of players back from last year, but is mixing in 3 transfers and 3 freshmen who could play significant roles. So that's kind of where we are. Now, in the case of Kansas, they at least have that core group to rely upon. That's also, to an extent, true of teams one way or the other that have fallen differently. I mean, Illinois had sort of that core. It hasn't gone well anyway. Gonzaga had that core. They played great to this point. Duke has that core and played great to this point. So it's been a little bit of, for those teams, a little bit of both. Teams that are almost entirely new, Texas goes up and gets run out of the gym by Gonzaga. Michigan's lost, I think, 3 times already. So that's been hard for a lot of teams. And I think to an extent, Missouri fits into that category. They're just not losing to, they're not just losing to teams like Gonzaga or Villanova or whoever. They lost to UMKC. They lost to Florida State, which maybe is a borderline top 30 team. They didn't just lose the game. They got run out of the gym. So the transfers that they have, they may be playing okay statistically, but they're not really making an impact from a winning and losing standpoint. A guy like Kobe Brown, who's grown into a prominent role, is doing a really nice job, getting 16 points, seven rebounds. You'd be really happy with that, but I think there needs to be more to go with him for his statistical impact to really make a difference. They lack a true point guard. It's not there. And that's a hard thing to manufacture. And it's a hard thing to get around. If you don't have someone who is a high level point guard, and you don't have to be Chris Paul, but you have to be proficient. And I'm not sure that's there. And you add that all up. And, I was talking with the guys on the morning show that I'm on with the Border Patrol today. And I said, if this were a NFL team or an NBA team, you could at least say, if this thing keeps up, then at least we get a number 1 draft pick. But that's not really the case when it comes to college sports. If you have a tough year, you just have a tough year. And that does, it doesn't get you anywhere except to the start of next year with minimal optimism.
You mentioned Illinois. They played in Kansas City last night, and I was at the game doing the PA. And also Arkansas played here last night in the CBE Classic, and those are 2 future opponents for the Tigers. Illinois looked terrible. They got off to a 19-4 lead, and they got outscored by 35 points the rest of the way against Cincinnati. Kofi Coburn had 10 points in the first 8 minutes and then sort of disappeared, only played 27 minutes. I was stunned by how badly they played, how trouble they had scoring.
Yeah, they played against Marquette without Kobe and Kofi. And I think that made a difference. Not just in that game, but I mean, in terms of their development, he was suspended for a silly thing. He sold some of his merchandise when he was technically a pro, when he went into the draft. And then literally like 3 weeks later, it became legal to do that. And instead of just saying, well, okay, you got to miss a game. They took the 3 games from him that would have been under the old rule. It's just really unnecessary, and it's had a significant impact. I think that what's happened, and this was a smart move by Wes Miller, the new coach at Cincinnati, was that after Kofi really wrecked them early, they decided to really shade him, to put as much pressure on him and make it as difficult to see him as possible. And then Andre Curbelo, who kind of melted down against Marquette on the road in the Gavitt games a week and a half ago. They in that game he was 4 of 18 from the field and turned it over 7 times because there was no Kofi, excuse me, for an outlet. And so once they took that outlet away yesterday, Cincinnati went back to the same mode. Instead of saying, okay, what I did against Marquette didn't work. We're not doing that ever again. He went and did the exact same thing. The numbers weren't as bad, but the performance was. And they need to get him to understand that his first job is to be a facilitator. And that's, and even if it looks like he's open in the lane, and even if they're taking away all his options, he's still got to try to find a way to be a facilitator first. And that's blaming him, but also the coaches have to do a better job when someone does what Cincinnati did last night of countering it and finding ways to get players open in dangerous spots so that Kofi, who is as good so that Andre, who's as good a passer as there is in college basketball, can find them. They're another team, like I said, working their way through patching together new players with old players. And Kofi, because he missed the first 3 games, is something of a new player, at least for now. And they met the wrong opponent last night because Cincinnati was well coached, mentally tough, and was able to use that game plan and put Illinois in a bad spot. If Illinois is still in this position when the bragging rights game comes around, that could be, that game could get in reach for the Tigers, because the Tigers have beaten really good Illinois teams before. So that, Illinois has to play better, and Curbelo has to sharpen himself up, or that'll be an interesting game. Arkansas is a challenge for the Tigers because of their ability to pressure the basketball, their quickness on the perimeter. That's going to be a very interesting game when it comes to fruition. The one thing I'll say about the Tigers that is, most ominous to me is, even beyond the early struggles with personnel, is the schedule is just brutal. I mean, I think I looked at it with the guys this morning, and I think it's starting December 10th or 11th. From that point on, I did not see a mid-major opponent the rest of the way. Playing against high major players every single night is really hard. And if you've got guys, and if you've got a team that you really love, it's hard for them. If you've got a team that's struggling and trying to put itself together, it's downright brutal. And I use Kentucky last year as an example of that. They were trying to put things together, and every time they walked onto the floor, they were playing another high major opponent, and they just couldn't get there.
Now the Tigers will have to go to Lawrence. They play Illinois, and then I think they have an early SEC game against Kentucky. So it's pretty rough. Arkansas, you talked about, also they having a 7'3" guy up front who can shoot the 3 and hit his free throws. Connor Vanover, he didn't play much the second half, but gosh, when he's in the game, he's pretty dominant, and they get pretty good guard play too. Yeah,
I really love JD Note, who's their primarily their shooting guard. I think he's terrific. Coming into the year, it was a real step forward for him because they had several other really good guards on last year's team, including Jalen Tate, the point guard who transferred in for last year, and several of them cleared out, and it left JD holding all that responsibility. And you never know how a player is going to respond to being the star, so to speak. Some guys just, they've been built for that their whole lives. And some guys, it's, oh my gosh, everybody's coming at me now. Well, JD has handled it really well. He wasn't great last night, but he's been really good through the part of the year. This is tonight, excuse me, in KC is a real challenge for him because we've seen now that Cincinnati will really defend hard. So should be an interesting game. And eventually for the Tigers, it'll be a very challenging matchup for them to face.
You have a game tonight, number 1 Gonzaga against number 2 UCLA. Gonzaga hasn't been tested yet at all. I guess UCLA struggled a little bit against Bellarmine last night, but should be quite a matchup. After they both met in the Final Four last year, and UCLA almost pulled the upset. What do you look for tonight?
Well, I think the number one thing, this is pretty much the same UCLA team, with the exception of right now their starting center is Miles Johnson. Their regular center got hurt in the first game and probably won't be back till after Thanksgiving. They're not rushing it. They expect to have 40 games this year, so they're not going to rush to get him back, especially when they have a kid like Miles Johnson, who started for 3-4 years at Rutgers. Big, strong, long, really intelligent, has good hands, is especially effective on defense. So they've got him to have to deal with Drew Timme, Gonzaga's All-American center. And then what does UCLA do to defend Chet Holmgren? I'm not sure everybody is familiar with Chet. Chet was the number 1 player in high school basketball last year. Now, we didn't have a McDonald's game. There weren't a lot of the same opportunities to see a player like Chet when he was still in high school, but he's 7 feet tall. I don't know if he cracks 200 pounds. He is really lean, really thin, but very dynamic. I think probably you have to go all the way back to Kevin Garnett to get a physical comparison, a game comparison. He's a lot like Kevin. Kevin, the difference between him and Kevin is Kevin played, on the old Spinal Tap scale in terms of volume. It goes all the way to 11. And that was Kevin in terms of intensity. Most intense player I've ever seen in 40 years of doing this. Most intense player I've ever seen. Zach doesn't have that. I mean, he's a normal, he plays normally hard like a normal person. Kevin was literally off the charts in that regard. But everything else about him kind of similar. The dynamism is similar, the length, the lean body type, the fraction of a perimeter, of a deep shot. It's the seeds are there, but it's not all the way there yet. And Kevin eventually became a very effective deep shooter. Chet will too, but the ability to play on the move, Kevin could do that. Bounce it, get to the rim. Chet can do that. Bounce it, get to the rim. So what does UCLA do with that? He's 7 feet tall. That's not your normal power forward. So I'll be very curious to see. I expect Jaime Jaquez, who's about 6'6", 6'7", very physically tough, really mentally tough player. I expect him to get that assignment, and I think it's going to be an interesting challenge for him. And the effectiveness in that matchup may be the most important thing in the game.
Another question I want to ask you, Duke's star freshman Paolo Banchero gets a DWI charge this week along with Mike Krzyzewski's grandson. Paulo was on your preseason All-American team, and I think you said he's probably the most physically gifted player in the country. What will be the repercussions of this?
Well, first of all, it was an odd charge, one that I'd never heard of, and I'm not trying to excuse him. Just he was charged with aiding and abetting the DUI. He was not driving. And I don't know the exact circumstance. No one's asked me about this yet, which I was a little surprised by, because I've done a number of radio interviews and such. But Mike did not talk much about why he didn't suspend Paolo for that. I can't remember who they played. They played a bye game. It was somebody they would have beaten by 20 with or without him. So he didn't put him out there because he needed him to win. He could have won with me out there, So he was making a point. However, he didn't really make the point. He had the opportunity to say, here's why I did what I did, even though it wouldn't have cost me anything to suspend him, and it would have made everybody just not ask me about it, because it would have, he would not have had to field a single question if Paolo didn't play that night. And if he'd come back the next game, based on the unusual nature of the charge and the fact that some other, even Mark Few, who was arrested for a similar charge back in, I think, July, he only missed one regular season game. So if Mike had chosen to suspend Paolo, he could have shut the whole thing down. Instead, he chose to make a point. And he did say that it's not the same what happened with Michael Savarino, his grandson, and Paolo. And that was pretty much, he had one other sentence. I can't remember the exact verbiage. Something like, no matter what you hear or read, or something like that. And then he left it there. And I would have liked to have known what point he is making. I assume he was making the point that that maybe the reaction had been a bit extreme to Paolo's arrest. But I think that I think it would have served him better in that circumstance if he'd said, here's why I didn't suspend him. Honestly, the easiest thing to do would have been to just suspend him, because they literally could have won the game with me playing 18 minutes. I don't think I could have gone 30, but I think they could have won with me going 18.
Talking with Mike DeCourcy of the Sporting News. If you'd like to ask him a question, use the chat feature, and at the end of our discussion, we'll fire away at him. Mike, I've got to ask you, I didn't hear your session with the Border Patrol this morning. How much do you watch, and how do you get time to watch? I think I could ask you about the backup point guard at Mankato State, and you would know what's going on. How do you keep track of all this?
My trick, really, honestly, is I DVR every game that I think matters. And then I go through them quickly that way, because like tonight, the UCLA Gonzaga game, I will watch live and watch the entirety of it. If I did that for every game that I need to watch or want to watch, I wouldn't literally have time to do anything else. And so I DVR every significant game, and then I'll sit down at around 9:30 when my wife goes to bed, and I'll just go through all the games before bed. And maybe sometimes if it's a late game, I'll let it, I'll let the DVR run, then I'll get up the following morning, and then maybe I'll watch that one while I'm walking on my treadmill. That's the only way I could see to get through it. The biggest games, Duke, Carolina, this one tonight, some of those kinds of games. And of course, when I'm on BTN as an analyst, I'm obviously watching games live. But for the most part, I try to do most of it through DVR, and it allows you, you skip through. The number of live free throws I watch during a season is very small. Because the score is going to tell me whether the ball goes in or not. So it's got to be a big free throw at the end of a game for me to sit there and watch it.
I want to ask you a little bit about conference realignment, especially as it affects Missouri and as it affects Kansas City. Oklahoma and Texas going to the SEC, and in the Big 12, which has the tournament here, we'll have a revised look here in a couple of years. What do you think will be the relative strengths of those conferences with the changes?
Well, obviously in football, it's going to change the strength dynamic of the Big 12 because there aren't any Oklahomas out there. And of course, there are a lot of Texases out there, faded programs that are no longer at their glory level. The difference with Texas is that if they ever get it right, and it's been a long time, we all know what they're capable of doing. There's nobody out there like that. You can't find another Oklahoma, which is an established national power, because there are right now, with the way the college football playoff works, and the incentive to go to particular schools, Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson, Oklahoma, the college football playoff structure now directs you to go to those schools. You want to be in this thing? Better go to one of them, because Alabama can sit around and beat nobody, and they're still putting them at number 2 in the rankings. They could play poorly. Florida, LSU, doesn't matter. They're still they're still number 2 in the country. Why? Because they're Alabama. So if you're a kid at home wondering, where should I go play football, and Alabama's on the phone, well, why wouldn't you go there? If you want to play in the biggest games, you can't say, well, you know what, I'm going to be a pioneer. I'm going to go to Mizzou, and I'm going to take them to the playoff. Well, it's just you then. You're going to. There have been some excellent players at Missouri, but Alabama's got 20 of them, and so it's an unfair process as it's structured. And the expansion I think will change the dynamic of that. You'll see players start to say, "Hey, I can get in this thing if I go to Mizzou, if I go to Southern Cal, or if I go to UCLA, whatever the school." There'll be more players choosing more destinations in that case. So I think it's important that the Big 12 continue to push for that expansion with six automatic bids as part of it. The 12, whether it's 12 or 8, the 6 automatic bids has to be a part of it. And so I'm hopeful that that's the way the direction goes for the Big 12. Adding Houston, adding Cincinnati, those programs I think have been challenged to get to or stay at the level that they've been. Mick Cronin did an unbelievable job of getting Cincinnati to like 9 consecutive tournaments. The Wes Miller hire is going to pick that back up. Hiring Luke Fickell in football was tremendous, and he has done over and above, I think, what anybody could have expected. And ordinarily, you'd say that guy's automatically leaving there, but he likes it there, and now he can say, I can maybe go into the Big 12 and I could be, I might not be Oklahoma, but I could be the new Oklahoma. I may never quite get to the level where they are, but I mean, I can maybe come in and play at that level and be the best team in the league. And what does that mean? Then if we get a 12 or 18 playoff with 6 auto bids, then you can be playing for that bid and that sort of thing. So he may not be compelled to leave for anything but an extraordinary job, not just a good job that pays a lot of money, but an extraordinary job. So I think Cincinnati and Houston, basketball for Houston, football for Cincinnati, a little lesser extent on the other side. Cincy basketball isn't at the level the football is. Houston football isn't at the level basketball is, but they're both pretty good. So I think that they did some smart things. I would still like to see them find a way to add Memphis because I think that there's a significant brand and potential there. But I'm not sure whether or not they'll go in that direction.
We're going to get some questions here in a second. I want to ask you 2 quick soccer questions because I know you are one of the best soccer writers in the country. Kansas City in the NWSL their owners have made a commitment to build a $70 million stadium in downtown or by the river. That's quite a statement. And I think it's the first of its kind for women's soccer in the United States.
Well, I think it's tremendous. I just went, as a matter of fact, I drove down to Louisville. I don't know what the genesis of that, but their women's soccer team plays in a very nice, a lovely, I think they seat about 15. I thought it was perfect for the event, the NWSL championship on Saturday. It was a great event. The NWSL has a lot of problems as a league right now in terms of their player treatment. But what I saw Saturday was why that league matters, why we need that league. It needs to be repaired, but you don't want to junk it because the soccer was terrific. The competition was great. The fans were into it. I don't know what kind of audience it drew on CBS, but the fact that it was showcased on CBS was great for the game. So I'm very hopeful that that the NWSL's expansion into places like KC will continue to grow the league and maybe bolster the league and maybe get the league going in a direction of proper player treatment, while at the same time promoting the outstanding competition that the league can offer.
And this is a question I know you don't have the answer for. Kansas City is making a heated bid for a World Cup site for 2026. Do you think we have a chance?
Boy, I tell you what, now here's something that you can tell me. I had heard, so I wrote a piece back when all the finalists were announced, and then we finally published it, I think at the end of last year, I think, ranking the 16 or 17 cities that are still alive for bids in the United States. And when I ranked it, when I did it, I based it on Arrowhead being the site. Now I've heard since, is it possible that KC will have a new stadium by 2026, or is it definitely for Arrowhead?
I think the Chiefs lease runs for 10 more years. So I don't, the Royals are talking about building a new stadium downtown, and the Chiefs are, but it wouldn't get done by that time. So, yes.
All right. So anyway, you know, my only problem with KC as a host, you know, got everything great downtown, you know, the ability to create a festival atmosphere. I've been to four World Cups now. One I covered, 3 as a spectator. And the festival element is a big part of it. And KC is perfect for that. The only obstacle for KC to me is the fact that Arrowhead is not easily accessible from downtown. So solve that problem, and it's the best Midwestern city for the World Cup. Paul Brown Stadium in Cincinnati, they've got a lot going for them in Cincinnati, but I think the stadium, I'm not sure that the stadium is quite wide enough for a ideal field. Paul Brown Stadium, I believe Arrowhead is. I you know, I'm a big believer when I look at this. You can't have a coastal U.S. World Cup. I mean, you have to have the heart of the country involved. So KC, Cincinnati, Denver are basically your only 3 Midwestern cities. You can't just say, okay, we're in Chicago, so the rest of the Midwest can forget about it. Chicago doesn't want to be in. So it's got to be some of them. And it shouldn't just be one, in my estimation. It should be multiple. So whether you want to go west to Denver or east to Cincinnati, I really strong, you know, when I ranked those, I ranked them 1 to 16 or whatever. And KC came in at 5 for me. And honestly, as I said, like if Arrowhead were right there next to downtown or right in the middle of downtown or whatever, I probably would have ranked it 3. I think it's the perfect place, and I'll be disappointed if it's not selected.
We need to put you on the selection committee.
Me and FIFA. Ooh, I don't know they'd like me.
Well, I understand the benefits that you get from being on that committee are
true.
Lucrative.
My retirement account could use some FIFA help.
All right, let's go to some questions from our viewers. Konzo Martin is as fine a person as we could hope to have representing our university. I would imagine that on home visits, parents love him, but recruits not so much. Why does he struggle so much in signing blue chip talent in-state or out?
Well, I think the first part of that is that there hasn't been a truckload of in-state blue chip talent since he's been there, which isn't unusual. I mean, Missouri, Kansas is not a highly productive area for elite talent. You know, one of the things that a decade ago, when I talked to when Frank Haith was still coaching and the SEC thing came about, I mean, I remember him expressing concern about detaching Mizzou from Texas. And now maybe that bounces back when eventually UT gets into the league. Then you're not detached from the state of Texas anymore. Then you can say to a Texas recruit, hey, you know, we're coming down there. We're going to play in Austin all the time. And I would highly suspect that whatever divisional structure that they put together once they add those two, that they would probably try to reintroduce Mizzou to Texas and Oklahoma because there's a natural competitive pull there. So I would think that Konzo, when that finally comes to fruition, will be able to go back and say to Texas kids, hey, you know, we're going to be able to bring you back here every year. We're going to play at Austin every year. It's right up the road from Houston, Dallas, whatever. I think that'll help. But I think that it is difficult when you don't have a highly productive natural talent base. It becomes difficult because people say, well, why can't you just go get somebody from Chicago or St. Louis, or why can't you go get somebody from New Orleans or wherever it might be? And the answer is always, well, there are already teams there, and the kid maybe wants to play in front of his folks, or maybe wants to play with a particular coach, and he has to skip over like that school and like 5 more between you and them. It's a challenge, and I think that's one of the issues that's come up for Mizzou over the decades since they split into the SEC. And again, I think that's the biggest plus for Mizzou as a football and basketball school. I'm not a fan of bringing Texas into the league because it just makes whatever you're shooting for, a championship, a NCAA bid, whatever it might be, it just makes it that much more difficult. But it does give you that opportunity to go into Texas and say, your folks are going to be able to watch you play. Your family's going to be able to watch you play without great effort.
You did a story for the season with Coach K. What was the highlight of your conversation with him as he begins his final season?
Well, the fact that, it starts with the fact that he accepted the interview request. I've known Mike now for 20 plus years, and he turned down a lot of people. 60 Minutes. There was a HBO type group that wanted to do something with him. I mean, he turned down people way between way bigger bats than I do. So honestly, the fact that he agreed to do it was the biggest thing for me. Other than that, I think it was, I think that probably, I'm trying to think of what stood out to me. I know that it was really fun to talk about some of the old time stuff. He didn't want to do a lot of it, but he agreed to talk to me about the 1992 Kentucky game. And then on top of that, his explanation of why he's doing this. There are a lot of people, Mike has a lot of people that don't care for him, because you get that successful, especially in something like sports. You get that successful and people don't like you anymore. They want you to go away. They want you to lose. And Tom Brady, I'm guilty of that as a Steelers fan, being tired of Tom Brady, so I understand where people are coming from. But the fact that he's really, wanted to explain the dynamic that he's trying to instill with the transition from him to John Shire. It's not about him going around the country and getting Barca loungers and standing ovations. It's about him thinking that this is the best way to go from someone who's won more games than anybody that's ever coached, and whoever has to follow that person. It's a hard thing to do. You guys saw it with Norm. It's not easy to follow a legend. And so he's trying to see if he can engineer that to be effective. And by hiring John and John being able to go out and recruit as the head coach at Duke, in July, they've signed, I think, 3 top 10 players. So can John coach them? That's what we'll find out. But it helps a lot more when you're able to recruit that level of players, not just come in and have to deal with whoever left.
Mizzou fans are happy to see Kim English having some success in his first season at George Mason. What are the chances that Mizzou makes a run for him down the road?
Well, Konzo's still a young man, so let's hope that it goes
right.
Well there. That this, if this year is as difficult as it looks like it's going to be, that it's a short-term thing. I will say this about Kim: when he was at Mizzou that great year, the 30 win year, he was different. He was extraordinary, not just as a player, but as a young man. The fact that he's a head coach 10 years after that, it only surprises me in that I wouldn't have been surprised if he were still playing 10 years after that. But he was just, he got my job and the basketball world around him at a level that only maybe 3 or 4 players in my 35 years of college basketball coverage got it. And that's how extraordinary he is. So the fact that he's a head coach now and has a really nice win over Maryland under his belt on the road last week. Not surprising. I think he's going to have a great career as a head coach.
Assuming sanctions are eventually levied on Kansas, what do you expect the penalties will be?
Well, I think they're going to get hit hard. I don't know. I think there will be postseason time withdrawn. I suspect a year. I think there will be penalties that go beyond that. But what I suspect that whatever penalties are installed against Kansas, that's going to wind up in court. I think that's one of the reasons why they were okay with going into what's called the IARP. I believe those letters stand for Independent Accountability Review Process, if I remember correctly. It's a new device that was a product of the Condoleezza Rice Commission that was introduced, I think, in 2018. No case has yet been dispensed by that. They have 4 or 5 in the hopper, so to speak. They've not yet finished any of them, but Kansas is different than the others. Whatever is alleged to have happened, remember, most of what was found out and most of what was placed in their notice of allegations developed from testimony from a particular trial that happened, I think, in the fall of 2018. I believe that was the timing of it. There was a lot of testimony that this happened, that happened, the other thing happened. But there was also testimony mostly from the same witness that said this, that, and the other thing, that Kansas, the coaching staff, was unaware of his activities. And the NCAA plowed right through that. So what the NCAA said is, we believe all the bad stuff, but not this. We don't believe the exculpatory stuff. And I think they're gonna have a hard time making that stand up, unless they have some other, card up their sleeve that wasn't in the NOA. I just think they're going to wind up in court over that. There is no appeal for the IARP, unlike the old Committee on Infractions or the current Committee on Infractions. You can't appeal what comes out of there, but no one's stopping you from taking it to court, and I think that's where they'll go.
Your story on Peyton Watson of UCLA indicated some coaches took one-and-dones who had taken one-and-dones regretted it. Do you think recruiting these types of athletes will change, or is the upside just too tempting?
I think it's too tempting. I think everybody looks at it and says, one, I can get this great player. He's unbelievable. And 2, I can coach him. I can figure him out. He and I get along fine. It'll work. And unless your program is properly positioned to handle that player, then it's a real problem. I mean, we saw it at Texas, Rick Barnes's final years. We saw it with Shaka at Texas. They both had one-and-done players. Their programs did not move forward. My friend Mike Hopkins at Washington, tremendous young man, had an unbelievable first year too as Washington's coach. Brings in 2 one-and-dones in his 3rd year, I think it was, and it all went to heck. And because you recruited those guys, you didn't recruit guys who would be with you for a little while and could build something. I've seen that happen a lot of times. Now, it's different at Duke and at Kentucky for a couple of reasons. One, they are taking the absolute best guys that are total college game changers. John Wall, Anthony Davis, Jalil Okafor, Justice Winslow, taking total college game changers, Paolo Banchero, and plus they have a little bit of experience now at doing this, so they have an idea of how to deal with it. So the ones where it hurts are the ones that are taking those players in and they're not used to it and they don't know how to work it. And I've seen it hurt a lot of programs. I mentioned a few, there are many others. Where I think UCLA is different with Peyton Watson is, one, Peyton didn't come in expecting or needing or desiring to be the show. He wants to be part of a great team. He joined UCLA knowing that more than likely they were going to have Juzang back and Jaime Jaquez back at the positions he mostly plays. So he knew that all along, and he said, doesn't matter, I'm coming in. And Mick sold him on the idea that they're going to pick you based on your potential and not on how many points a game you score. And you can look to a few examples of that. Scotty Barnes at Florida State didn't play normal starters minutes, didn't get a ton of shots. Still, I think went third overall or something like that. I got a chance to see him play a couple of weeks back from the good seats at Gainbridge Fieldhouse now against the Pacers. My wife's company set us up with some good seats, and man, is he a player! Just a remarkable player. So I think they sold Peyton on that, and so I don't think I know he's not going to be disruptive. He's too, he's there. He's got a lot of Kim English in him. I can't pay him a higher compliment than that. Got a lot of Kim in him, and I think Kim would say, "I wish I had his talent, so that I could have been a top 10 pick." But there's a lot of. He's a really bright young man, and I think he understands that this can work for him, even if he doesn't average 15, 20 a game.
Last question. This is a tough one. Chiefs Steelers, December 26th at Arrowhead. What do you think?
Oh man. Oh geez. It's going to be hard for the Steelers. I think it somewhat depends on, if they come in there reasonably healthy, they'll have a shot. I mean, they went out there and played, remember I was joking before about me playing for Duke. They practically had me playing in the secondary for the Steelers on Sunday. I mean, it was bad. Joe Hayden was out, Minka Fitzpatrick was out, and they just got shredded, but they still came close. So if they're healthy, they'll have a shot. They need to put pressure on Mahomes, and that's not easy to do because he's such an extraordinary player. But I'm hopeful that when they get to that game, that it's not one that they really desperately need to make the playoffs or get in a decent spot or whatever, because I know it's going to be hard.
That'll be the Chiefs' last home game. I just got, how hard was it to watch that Steelers-Lions game a couple weeks ago?
Awful. Couple of reasons. One, I was in a survivor pool where you have to pick one winner every week, but you can't pick the same team 2 times. And I made it to that was like week 9, I think. So it was down to like 5 of us. And there was no other obvious pick. I said to myself, when I made the pick, well, if they lose, I'll be miserable anyway. So I'll go ahead and do it. And of course, I made the pick on like Tuesday, and then like Wednesday, Ben turns up, he can't play the game. So it was hard on multiple levels, and especially when they fumbled twice in overtime on chances to win the game. When that happened, I said, do the Steelers lead the world in game altering late fumbles? Because they have, I could give you like 7 of them from the last 2-3 years. And then someone put a stat on Twitter that said, like, in 5 of their last 6 overtime games, they've had a fumble. 5 of the last 6 overtime games. Can you imagine that? It's crazy. I mean, how do you do that? Let's hope that the Chiefs game doesn't go to overtime, because if it does, I know the Steelers will fumble it away.
Mike, thank you. You're the best. We really appreciate it, and hope next year we get you in person.
That would be my pleasure. I always enjoy speaking with all of you. You're a great group. Good luck to the Tigers. Hope it goes better than the early returns suggest.
All right. Appreciate it very much. Mike DeCourcy from the Sporting News. Thanks for everybody for watching today. Thanks to Darren, as always, for setting up the call, Paul and Barry for lining up our speakers. Next week, Mizzou legend John Sunbold will be our guest. And in 2 weeks, Danny Heidert, the recruiting guru from St. Louis, as we approached National Signing Day for football. Everybody out there, have a happy Thanksgiving. We would like to remind you one more time to donate to Harvesters, which our organization has always supported every year. Go to harvesters.com and support them and what they do for Kansas City. Again, happy Thanksgiving, everyone. We'll see you next week when we have John Sunbold.